In the beginning, everything was perfect. From the moment I met Lisa, I believed she would be by my side for the rest of my life. The first few years of our marriage were filled with happiness, and the bond between us grew stronger with each passing day. But over time, tiny cracks began to appear in that once strong connection. As I found myself spending more and more time at work, the distance between Lisa and me grew. I never doubted her love for me until that fateful day. That night, as I walked through the dark streets of Sharpsburg, filled with anger and disappointment, I knew I had reached a point of no return. From the moment I discovered Lisa's betrayal, I decided I would not remain just a victim. I was the protagonist of this story, and I would set the stage. A plan was forming in my mind. Lisa and Blake would pay for what they had done to me. But this price wasn't just for a broken marriage, it was the cost of a shattered life. Everything started when I noticed a change in Lisa's behavior. Lately, she had become more distant, coming home late in the evenings, and constantly glued to her phone. At first, I brushed it off as work stress and exhaustion, but then one day I noticed a small bruise on Lisa's neck. When I asked her about it, she said, "I bumped into a cabinet in the kitchen." Such accidents had happened before, but this time something felt different. I started feeling uneasy. As the days passed, I became increasingly convinced that Lisa was hiding something from me. During a dinner one evening, Lisa told me she needed to attend a friend's wedding in Pittsburgh. She spoke with such excitement, but the dark thoughts in my mind wouldn't leave me alone. That night I couldn't sleep. I sensed a discrepancy in Lisa's story. The thought of checking her phone made me uncomfortable, but I felt compelled to do it. That night, after Lisa fell asleep, I quietly took her phone. I couldn't find anything in her messages, but one name in her contacts caught my attention. Blake. Blake was an old friend of Lisa's, but the fact that they were in such frequent contact struck me as odd. In the following days, I began to closely observe Lisa's behavior. One day, I discovered a hidden compartment in the trunk of her car. Inside, I found a bottle of perfume and a man's necklace. When I held the necklace in my hand, I realized it belonged to Blake. That was the moment I knew Lisa had been lying to me and frequently meeting up with him. A wave of intense anger washed over me. This was a turning point for me. I could no longer trust Lisa, and I needed to uncover the truth. For several weeks, I secretly installed a GPS tracker in Lisa's car and monitored her movements. I watched as she drove to Blake's house and stayed there for hours. My heart was broken, but I was also ready to accept the harsh reality. Lisa had betrayed me, and there had to be a price for that. I would no longer be a victim. I would make my move in this game. After discovering Lisa's betrayal, I began to meticulously plan my revenge. This plan wouldn't just hurt them, it would destroy their lives. I started thinking through every detail carefully. I chose a night when Lisa and Blake would be together, a night when they would think they were happy, but I would take my revenge. The first step was to plant incriminating evidence in Blake's car. One night, knowing Lisa wasn't home, I smeared a few drops of blood inside her car. This blood would suggest that a crime had taken place. Then I stained the interior of Blake's car with more blood and left additional evidence. Everything had to be flawless. I was setting the stage to make them look guilty. Next, I moved on to the second phase of my plan. I drove to Blake's house. That night, seeing Lisa's car parked there fueled my anger even more. I quietly approached Blake's car and added a few more drops of blood. This would make them look like the culprits in this game. The anger and pain inside me helped me execute each step with precision. Every detail of this plan had to be perfect. Finally, I selected a spot in the park to create a fake crime scene. I parked my car and meticulously arranged everything. I splattered blood on the seat and the ground. I left the car doors open. I spread plastic sheeting and arranged everything flawlessly. The stage was set. This would be a game where they appeared guilty. When everything was complete, I felt a sense of relief. My plan had been executed perfectly. At that moment, I went to a phone booth and called the police. Changing my voice, I reported an abandoned car in the park. "There's blood everywhere," I said. This would get them moving. When I returned to Blake's house, I saw that Lisa was still inside. She had no idea what was happening. The anger inside me was giving way to a sense of satisfaction. Watching them suffer would ease the pain they had caused me. Now all I had to do was wait. When morning came, I heard the police reports on their radios. When I learned that Detective Nesbitt had arrived at the scene, I knew my plan was working perfectly. As they headed to Lisa's house, I could imagine the shock on their faces. Finding my phone in the car would corner Lisa. When I heard the questions Nesbitt directed at Lisa, I felt a surge of victory. Everything was going exactly as I had planned. Watching how they would react to this situation was the greatest source of satisfaction for me. As the police began gathering evidence that pointed to Lisa and Blake being guilty, everything was unfolding just as I had planned. When Blake confessed to his relationship with Lisa during police questioning, my anger was replaced by a cold satisfaction. They were pawns in this game. I was the only one making moves on the board. When they went to trial, the desperation on Lisa and Blake's faces reminded me of the betrayal they had inflicted on me. The fear and uncertainty they felt in that moment mirrored the emotions I had experienced for weeks, even months. As the prosecutor laid out the charges one by one, Lisa's trembling hands and the panic in Blake's eyes satisfied me. Standing before the judge in the courtroom, their blank expressions only deepened my sense of revenge. As their defense attorneys struggled to prove Lisa and Blake's innocence, I could see how hopeless their situation really was. The evidence weighed down on them like a dark cloud. Blake's confession, Lisa's contradictory statements, and all the evidence gathered by the police painted them as guilty. They had destroyed my life, and now it was their turn. Finally, when the jury's verdict was announced, the courtroom fell silent. The jury members had taken their seats, and the verdict was in. As the judge read the decision, the mix of fear, pain, and regret on Lisa and Blake's faces marked the end of this game for me. Guilty, the judge said. That single word represented the end of everything for me, but for them it was just the beginning. The moment Lisa began to cry, it pierced through the cold silence of the courtroom. The blank look in Blake's eyes showed that he had given up. When they were sent to prison, I felt a strange emptiness inside. Yes, I had gotten my revenge. Yes, my plan had worked perfectly. But what now? The anger and pain inside me were replaced by a sort of emptiness. This victory wasn't as sweet as I had imagined. However, the truth would soon come out. When I, known as Mark Evans, revealed that I was alive and free, that I had staged the entire fake crime scene, the shock and surprise on Lisa and Blake's faces were priceless. They were in prison while I was enjoying my freedom. A year later, when Lisa and Blake were released from prison, their lives would never be the same. This revenge had not only taken away their freedom, but also their souls. They might be free, but the pain and regret they carried within them would never fade. Every night I thought about the days Blake and Lisa spent in prison. I imagined their disappointments, fears, and regrets. My revenge had not only taken their lives, but also their souls. The tragedy that Lisa and Blake endured was the price they paid for the injustice done to me. In the end, I was the one who emerged victorious in this story. But the taste of this victory wasn't as sweet as I had imagined, because everything I left behind had also created deep wounds within me.